What's going on, guys? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I got some breaking news that Charles Oliveira says he wants to return into the UFC Octagon in either late August or early September sometime during then, and possibly even get one more fight throughout that year, but I think that's highly unlikely. But I do think that Charles Oliveira is going to fight coming up very, very soon. If you guys enjoyed the UFC content and news, please leave a like, subscribe. If while you're down there, turn on post notifications so you don't miss a video, and let's get right into this breakdown. Okay, so it was announced that Charles Oliveira wants to return sometime pretty soon, stepping into the octagon, hopefully in late August or early September. And this really is an interesting thing for me. We all know that Charles Oliveira just came off a loss to Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 300. He also just pulled out a fight with Islam Makhachev back in October at UFC 294 and beat Beneil Dariush at UFC 289 in Vancouver. And Charles Oliveira is one of the best fighters in the UFC, and he's probably one of the most fun fighters in the UFC. If you have not catched my UFC Biggest Stars video, Charles Oliveira is definitely in that video somewhere. But Charles Oliveira has a very fan-friendly style, as we all know. We all love Charles Oliveira, and anytime it is Charles Oliveira fight week, the focus shifts off the main event right onto Mr. Oliveira's fight. But who do I think that Charles Oliveira is going to fight if he does return coming in late August or early September, and what card do I think he's going to fight on? First off, I do think he's going to fight on the UFC 306 card at the Las Vegas Sphere. Why not have one of the biggest cards of all time and put one of the biggest stars of all time on it? Charles Oliveira is mutually loved around the UFC organization by all fans and faculty there. And I do think that putting him on this card is something that's going to bring so much more hype around it. You look at his addition to the main card of UFC 300, and that fight almost seemed like the main event on UFC 300, but that was just Charles Oliveira's aura and everyone around him. Now, I do think there are a couple opponents that Charles Oliveira could face at UFC 306, and that's when I'm predicting him coming back, but do not fully say that that's when Charles Oliveira is going to fight in the UFC next. But I do think there's a couple opponents that could fight him next. I think a Dan Hooker fight does make sense. Charles Oliveira just lost his last fight to Arman Tsarukyan, and Dan Hooker beat Jalen Turner last year, but he did break his orbital and his arm in that fight. So this is a long time coming to where Dan Hooker hasn't fought in the last 12 months. We also have Charles Oliveira fighting someone like Mateusz Gamrot, who is number 6 in the ranking. He beat Rafael Dos Santos, and he beat Rafael Fiziev, but that was when Fiziev tore his ACL in that fight. So I think that there are a couple options for Charles Oliveira. The other option for that would be Charles Oliveira moving up to welterweight and fighting Colby Covington at UFC 306. But I do think that Charles Oliveira is going to stay in the lightweight division and fight someone either like Mateusz Gamrot or fight someone like Dan Hooker. Either of those fights would be amazing. I would love to see Charles Oliveira versus Dan Hooker. I think that would be an absolute war to have. Dan Hooker has had some crazy fights with Dustin Poirier, and even his fight with Islam Makhachev were some of the craziest fights. And one of my favorite fights of all time, if you guys have never seen, was Dan Hooker versus Jalen Turner. That was an absolute banger of a fight to see. That was an absolute war between two human beings, and probably my fight of the year last year. But just Charles Oliveira being one of the best fighters in the UFC and being one of the most entertaining fighters of the UFC, him wanting to return soon is very good news for the UFC organization and amazing news for the UFC fans, since we love to watch him. Thank you guys so much for watching me breaking down this news of Charles Oliveira wanting to return to the UFC Octagon in either late August or early September. Please let me know if you think that this is not only true or that you do think that he's going to return at UFC 306 in the Las Vegas Sphere. I just think it makes way too sense to not have Charles Oliveira on that card, considering how big of a name he is, how big of a star he is, and of how much more name brand value he can bring to that massive card already. If you guys enjoy the UFC content or news, please leave a like and subscribe. While you're down there, turn on the bell as well, just so you guys are informed when I do post videos. And I really do appreciate you guys watching the videos. And I will see you guys later with more UFC content and news.